I think this is the 5th annual Grassroots Network meeting here, and I've been to all 5. I remember one was a pretty nasty snowstorm, but we made it through, and it's a pleasure to be back. Listen, I don't know how to say this any other way. We are in the fight of our lives. And no, I am not just talking about the democracy. I'm talking about all of us. We are in the fight of our lives. Wisconsin has long prided itself for its high voter turnout, and yet now we have on our hands an escalating war on voting. We have new laws being put in place and new laws being proposed virtually all the time to make it more difficult to express the public will at the ballot box. We have districts drawn in a way that enable the party in power to win more seats in the Congress and in the state assembly and state senate, even though the opposition party wins the most votes. And then once those elected take office, if you want to go and watch them conduct the public's business, and you sit up in the gallery of the assembly or the senate, you can't read a newspaper, you can't check your iPhone, you can't crack open a laptop computer. And quite literally, you have to sit down and shut up because there's no talking and no standing in the galleries. And that is what has come to our state capitol. A building in which the words are still inscribed on the ceiling of the governor's conference room. The will of the people shall be the law of the land. Those words still appear on the ceiling. And yet, if you are willing to sit down and shut up and not read a newspaper or open a laptop computer, and you watch our lawmakers doing the public's business, what they are likely debating is not a bill that they wrote and that they got inspiration from you or from their constituents around the state. No, they're probably debating a bill that was written by a corporate-funded bill mill out of Washington, D.C. The most recent example of which, of course, is the mining legislation that is making its way through the legislative process right now, right here, right now. Now, I don't think it was a coincidence that we were able to find that the interests in favor of that mining legislation have made nearly $16 million in campaign contributions to the governor and to the state legislators who are making these decisions, while those opposed to the legislation have given barely $25,000. So those who want this legislation enacted have given 610 times as much money to those empowered to make a decision about this legislation than those who have real concerns about what this may do to our state. That's what I mean when I talk about the fact that we face the fight of our lives. There is the war on voting. There is partisan gerrymandering, rigging of elections through the way these districts have been drawn. There are these outrageous gallery rules that are an affront to the First Amendment rights. There is the crafting of legislation by corporate-funded bill mills. All of that has visited us, and then, of course, there is the money. The money that these elected officials are marinated in. I won't bore you with lots of numbers. I won't throw a blizzard of numbers at you, but I do want to share 4 that are illuminating, 4 numbers that are illustrative of the fight of our lives. The first one is $376 million. $376 million. That is how much has already been spent in Wisconsin, on Wisconsin elections, since the Citizens United decision was handed down in 2010. So just since 2010, we've seen $376 million spent on Wisconsin elections, and the meter is still running. There's still money for us to tap 92,553 donors. That number of donors, considering the fact that we have over 4 million eligible voters in Wisconsin, amounts to barely 2% of the voting age population of our state. And I am not saying, let me clarify right here, right now, I am not saying that 92,553 Wisconsinites provided money for all the spending in these elections. I'm saying 92,553 donors, many of whom are from out of state. In fact, the governor has received 2/3 of his money from outside the borders of Wisconsin. In his most recent report, it's up to 80% of his donors coming from outside of our state. So I'm not saying that these donors are from Wisconsin. I'm just saying that if you total them up, they amount to barely 2% of our voting age population in our state. Now, by the way, if you look at the 2 election cycles before the Citizens United decision and compare them to the 2 election cycles after Citizens United, in the 2 elections before Citizens United, we could count up $122 million in spending in Wisconsin elections. $376 million and counting since Citizens United. So spending has tripled since the law of the land was altered dramatically, radically by our United States Supreme Court in that Citizens United decision. A third number that I want to share with you is 32. And then a fourth number I want to share with you is 3.7 million. 32 donors to federal super PACs gave as much in 2012 as 3.7 million Americans collectively gave to the Obama and Romney campaigns combined. 32 millionaires and billionaires gave $313 million to federal super PACs that spent to influence the federal elections. 3.7 million Americans gave $313 million to Romney and Obama combined. Now, keep in mind that the population of the United States is nearly 309 million people. So, well over 300 million people. If money is speech, over 300 million people had the mute button on in 2012. And 32 people, 32 donors, spoke with 115 times as much volume as 3.7 million Americans did in 2012. We are in the fight of our lives. Now, having said all that, we face challenges today that none of us has ever seen before. We face challenges greater than any in living memory. Threats to our democracy greater than any in living memory. But that is no cause for despair. It is no cause for depression. It is no cause for despondency. And I say that because even though none of us in this room is old enough to have personally experienced this, we have faced as a country conditions like this before, and those conditions have been challenged and those conditions have been defeated. So there is no reason for despair or despondency, even as we face challenges greater than any in living memory. The other reason I say there's no reason for us to be depressed is, you see, I spent 2 years of my life in the West African country of Mali, which has been in the news a fair amount lately. Mali never makes it in the news until disaster strikes. And disaster has struck, and Mali's been in the news a lot, and these religious extremists have taken over large parts of the country, and the French had to go in and try to root them out. I want to tell you a story about the accidental coup that happened in Mali. It's a story that hasn't made it into the news much, but it's central to what ultimately led to chaos and turmoil in that small West African country. You see, when I was soldiers nearby the nation's capital said that they weren't getting paid, they were discouraged and upset, and they decided they were going to march on the presidential palace and have words with the president. They marched on the Capitol, and a lieutenant came with them. And when the president saw soldiers coming, he fled. And they now have the presidential palace. And the lieutenant went on state television and said, we've taken over the government. His father watched him on television and said to his mother, come and see what your idiot son is doing. And they came, and she fainted dead away. But they had the country, and that, of course, created turmoil and led to military insurgents being able to take over large parts of the country. That's what happens when you don't have as much experience trying to govern democratically as we have been blessed to have in this country. We don't face anything that's too big for us. Now, I'm also going to go just a little bit over what I should, but I wanted to share with you one more thing. Jim Hightower is fond of calling our country a kleptocracy now, government run by thieves. And I tell you, I've had so many people come up to me and say, we don't even have a democracy anymore. And one person came up to me after a speech and said, we got a cactusocracy. And I had to go look it up. And I found it. Cactusocracy means government by the worst and most unprincipled. And I had another person, I'm not making this up, another person came up and said, we have a luteriocracy. And I had to look that one up too. And apparently it's derived from the word luterius, which means living in the mud or mud-like. And then of course some people say, no, it's a plutocracy. And if you look that up, you find distant celestial object, formerly known as a planet, or a cartoon dog. But I understand there's some Latin involved, and it really means government by and for the wealthy. And then some people will come up to me and they'll use the F word. I mean, not that F word. They'll say, well, this is fascism, isn't it? It's creeping fascism. And that's become such a loaded term because everybody hears that word and they can't disassociate that from Nazi rule and concentration camps. But it's interesting, the author Lawrence Britt looked at fascist regimes in Italy, Spain, Indonesia, several Latin American countries. He looked at all these different countries that had fascism, and what he found is that they didn't all have genocide in common. They were not all genocidal. But they did have these 14 characteristics in common. 1, strong and persistent expressions of nationalism. 2, disdain for the awards of human rights. 3, identification of enemies or scapegoats as a unifying cause. 4, avid militarism. 5, rampant sexism. 6, controlled mass media. 7, obsession with national security. 8, religion and ruling elite tied together, the merger of church and state. 9, power of corporations protected, the merger of corporation and state. 10, power of labor suppressed or eliminated. 11, disdain and suppression of intellectuals and the arts. 12, obsession with crime and punishment. 13, rampant cronyism and corruption. 14, fraudulent elections. Every single fascist regime has had those 14 characteristics in common. Now that is sobering when you listen to that list. I will simply end with this thought. When people come to me and say, do we have a democracy? My answer is always the same. Democracy is not something you have. Democracy is something you do. Democracy is not a noun, it is a verb. And as long as we do democracy, as long as we gather in places like this, as long as we say the things that will be said today, as long as we challenge what is weak about American democracy, as long as we do democracy, then democracy will never leave us. And I will be standing here next year, the year after that, fighting with you for as long as I have the energy to do so. I hope the democracy campaign is around a very long time, and I need your help to make sure that that happens. Democracy by demanding a statewide vote on Citizens United. You're going to see these petitions around here today. We can start doing democracy this way. We can do democracy just by reaching out outside this building, talking to friends and neighbors and co-workers, informing them and educating about the challenges that we face, the fight that we face ahead. And as long as we do democracy, swear to God, democracy will not leave us. Thank you.